Welcome back to the Field Service Excellence Show, and today we're diving into the next stage of our M&A in the Trade series, and we're going to go beyond the acquisition and initial integration phase. Let's say you've reached day 100 of integration. You've got all the systems aligned, the teams merged, and you've ironed out the initial kinks. So what's next? This is typically the point where, unfortunately, many leaders might think that really the heavy lifting is done, but actually this is where the real opportunity for value begins. And this ongoing stage is not just about maintaining, but it's about maximizing the value after the merger dust has settled. So in this second leg of the series, we'll be talking about strategies that make the most out of your investment beyond the initial integration period, and focusing on key processes like order to cash, procure to pay, and continuous improvement that can drive real ongoing growth. And to do that, I'm here as always with my amazing co-host Gyner Ozgul. Gyner, how are you doing, my friend?
Good. It's getting cooler, here in the States and the Midwest. So fall is really upon us.
Gearing up for the holiday season.
Yeah. No, I'm not looking forward to the snow though.
Hey, we should maybe bring you to the Philippines for a little while.
Yeah. Hey, you never know. Maybe we could do one of these in person.
That would be great. And joining us is a returning actually guest to the show, Symeon who's a lean practitioner. In fact, he's our lean sensei at Orgo, as I say, and brings deep experience in really sustaining value post-integration. Symeon, it's great to have you with us, man.
It's great to be back, Yassin. Thanks.
I'm excited to dive in. But before we get going, maybe Symeon, you can give us a quick introduction around your background.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm the owner and principal of an operational excellence consulting firm, Summit Value Streams, also based out of the Midwest. So we're not quite within shooting distance, Gyner, but we're experiencing similar weather. In fact, I need to clean up the fall that's all over my yard right now. But I jumped into the world of entrepreneurship after spending about 25 years working for Fortune 50 and private equity firms. In fact, it was one of those firms, Honeywell International, where I got my first formal training and certification in Lean Six Sigma back in 2004. And I loved it. And so I've been looking for more and more opportunities to practice and to apply the growing experiences I've had in business improvement and value creation ever since.
Yeah, and it's been a pleasure, man, working with you for the past few months in all areas in the business. And it's just infusing a new sense of hope and clarity and excitement. Nothing like lining the teams around growth and value creation and continuous improvement, and it's something that it's really exciting to see as a leader when your people are so engaged in continuous improvement. So what does it mean, and maybe I'll turn it over to you, Gyner, like what does it mean to you as a CEO of a platform and growing quite quickly and doing multiple acquisitions, and we were talking about a few deals happening here and there. What does it mean to you, Gyner, to focus on continual value creation after integration?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it before. First is always, how do you grow the revenue of the business? First and foremost, you can't cut your rate of success in these businesses, right? Part of the working thesis is always bringing two businesses together. We, from the center, should be able to support the new business and help them grow faster, right? I mean, that's a working thesis. And, people are like, well, how do you do that? For us, it's lead generation, helping with recruiting, thinking about ideas to merchandise ourselves, understanding the digital presence of the business. What does their website look like? What's their Google kind of analytics space? How does all of that work, right? But setting that aside, because to me, that's kind of the revenue growth opportunities of the business we always want to think about. And that's kind of in perpetuity, day one forever. But, in that first 60 days, a couple of areas start to really show up right away. You start to understand their technology or lack thereof, And usually in kind of entrepreneurial business, the lack of technology is also indicative of a lot of manual process that exists to offset the lack of technology. So you start to see it's not that the process is bad, it's just manual, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, giving you an example, collecting of payments from customers, right? In businesses that I've seen, sometimes we still have people, salespeople, or other roles, literally going to homes or B2B customers and picking up physical checks, right? And if you think about like cash generation activities, now you got to wait for that person to come to the office. Now you got to wait. That person in the office has to, on Friday, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, go to the bank and make the deposit. So you've added a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to your cash collection cycle when, there's other opportunities, ACH, deposit, payment portals that you can partner with to shorten your payment cycle. So giving you a very tangible example of how we look at the business on day one is, okay, you got the technology piece. That's very intertwined with the financials piece. Understanding AP, understanding AR, understanding what needs to change immediately in kind of the cash management sides of the business to align to kind of the expectations of the business as is today. And then for me, like the last one is how do we understand and support them from a personnel standpoint, whatever that means. It could be HR, it could be recruiting, it could be a number of other things that we get in and start to understand. Training, potentially, role definitions for people, because they're going to want, security in their roles. Like, what am I doing here? Does my job change? If it does, what does it mean? So to me, I start to look at that right away on day one. But like we've talked about in previous calls, with the owners, right? Don't do it in a vacuum. You have to do it with the owners. They have to be your champions of change. So that's a long way to answer your question, but that's essentially how I start to look at it.
Well,
I love that.
those manual processes too, and Yassin, you and I have seen this in person, right? Even recently, we start calling them Gyner. In Honeywell they always call them hidden factories, right? So you'd go and you'd acquire a business and you'd bring it in, and everything looks good on the surface, but those manual processes, they're usually not documented, and they're all up in somebody's head. These same ones that are worried about their roles and their future and what they're going to do next. And so there's all these things that they've been doing to keep the business successful and to keep things moving forward operationally that are sometimes very difficult to suss out until it breaks or until that person's not there.
Right. And I think the danger, especially if, for maybe a newer CEO who's leading a platform, it's easy sometimes to get caught up with acquisition, and not focus so much on organic growth. So I love your focus, Gyner, on growth. In fact, I was reading on LinkedIn the other day, Chris Hoffman. He runs a service business, and he was talking about how organic growth is so critical. And yes, it's great to do acquisition, but are you able to grow the businesses you have? Because sometimes pride and ego can lead entrepreneurs to want to say things like, yeah, we've acquired 10 companies and we're doing roll-ups and we're in 20 cities. But when people aggressively invest their time, their energy, their resources in pursuing acquisitions, when they would be better served by focusing on growing the businesses that they have, like there's a temptation that comes in it. And I love that the focus is how can you drive growth for what you have. Yes, keep on this acquiring companies, but how can you grow what you already have in place? So for instance, if and we'll be touching on a few areas, just like a teaser. So this is more of an introduction episode, and we'll be doing several episodes where we're going to do a deep dive into some of the key areas for continual value creation. But one of the key areas that keep popping up, especially in our work with a lot of private equity portfolio companies setting up their shared service centers here at Ozgul, like customer service, even post-integration. You might find inconsistencies in support practices that lead to delays and customer frustration and even customer churn and delayed revenue. So Gyner, Symeon, like, what are some of the value opportunities you've seen in customer service post integration?
So I'll hit on two, like one that you just mentioned. There's always an ability to understand where the customer process is strained, right?
Mm.
And really, you get that from like the people in the business. You start, I like to do what I'll call ride-alongs in quotes
Mm.
with people after we buy the business. Really, my objective with the ride-along is just to learn about the business, right? You start to learn what
Going
they
to
do
begin with.
great. You start to learn where their pain is, and if their pain is, hey, the person at the office, she's our APAR person, but she's our customer service person, and she has to make the choice every day of which phone to answer,
Yeah.
then that customer may be waiting 2-3 hours for a phone call back, and that's a missed opportunity, right? Depending on the type of business you're in, you may have missed a revenue opportunity. Here we just talked about growth. We missed the revenue opportunity because somebody wasn't there live to answer the customer's need in real time and relay that back to the business and get somebody out. So yes, for sure, what you just identified. I'd say the second piece is scalable growth in customer service, right? So we talked growth a few minutes ago. We got to think about, hey, how can I accelerate the processes in this business to help them grow faster, right? Because what you're going to hear and understand in a lot of these businesses is, hey, we have an impediment to growth because we can't grow customer service fast enough. We can't find the talent we need or train them fast enough, right? So when you start to think about, components of, I'll just call them in-source or outsource components, where you do it, Ozgul being a great partner of mine in the past, but where you do it is really dependent on what your needs are. I think it's important to really understand that and say, if this business's impediment is their ability to take calls in, I can use an external resource to complement my internal resource and scale that much faster and take advantage of the revenue opportunity.
I love that.
And really to build that consistency too, right? When you're scaling the business and when things are growing, and that example that you use, you see it all the time. It's like, okay, we've got one person, they've got effectively 4 different roles, 4 different departments, we would call it in a large organization. And they're trying to balance between customer service and billing or accounts payable. And so the ability to be able to have consistency, to provide the consistency, to be flexible based upon the demand of the times, and have that customer service that can flex and be available as far as the customer is concerned, 24/7. Hopefully, that's an important thing to keep focused on and to build out.
Yeah, and the biggest pain point we typically see in customer service is this after-hour support. Very few people really are interested in working after hour or stretching themselves too thin. And sometimes they even give the phones to the technician, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Let the technician fix the equipment, not take in phone calls, and because just like you said, on a ride along with a technician, and I was talking to him, and he's like, he's been at this company for like 15 years. I'm like, what keeps you? He's like, well, what I love about this company is they let me do my job. All I want to do is go to the customer, say hi, fix the equipment, and say bye. That's it. I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to take phone calls. I don't want to chase bills. I don't. Yeah, I just want to do my job.
Yeah, and that customer experience, by the way, people tend to think of customer service in a very linear way. Like that customer experience, especially as we start talking about things like AI, and I know you're exploring it at
Yes,
Ozgul
we'll probably do
quite
a
a
deep
bit.
dive on that. Yeah.
Like here we are all trying to understand what does the customer feels, and that's a good example. Tech wants to go in. He is focused on just the repair, but you as a business owner want to understand something, the net promoter score of that event, right? Now you can use an outsourced component, whether that be a live person or AI, depending on your requirements, to call that customer immediately right after the job is closed and do a really quick survey and say, I like to call it the Delta one question, right? Delta Airlines in the US does a great job of this. They ask you the one question of how you rated your experience. you could really start to understand the impact of that and how you can improve. So, customer service isn't all just about answering phone calls, because people get really wrapped about that.
Mm.
It's about smoothing out your process to make it frictionless for your customer, wherever that is in your order to cash process.
Well, and answering the phone call is to gather information about a customer need too, right? So part of the scaling is not just the ability and the after hours and the support and picking up the call quickly on the first two rings or whatever, but once the call is had, how quickly can you transfer the information from that call to the responsible party,
Mm.
to the delivery system, to the tech, to the
Parts.
procurement, to where
Yeah.
parts, wherever it needs to go. And if you got somebody that's doing two different roles, right, and then they put that down, they work on something else, having that consistency to be able to have that
Yeah.
flow of information is important.
Yeah. Beautiful, and customer service is an obvious area, but one of the non-obvious areas that that I saw you pioneering. Honestly, you were the first partner, the Ozgul partner, to pioneer this area, and it's been quite exciting. And one of the fastest growing line of business that we have is customer support, technician support. People think about the customer, but what about the technician? So we went on to looking for technicians here around the Philippines, working for the McDonald's and the Burger Kings, and we took them behind, fixing equipment, and we put them behind computers instead, and that was an amazing unlock. So, Gyner, maybe you can talk a little bit about this unlock.
Yeah, so the way I thought about it I remember when we were just kind of brainstorming that idea a number of years back, and I don't remember it now, but I knew it then. We knew how much revenue a technician generates per hour, right? On a per hour basis. So if I could get more hours of revenue generation and less hours of administrative work, that was better and more profitable for me, even with the incremental SG&A that having a tech support person in the background was going to cost me, because his revenue generation was way, like 5, 6, 8 times greater than the cost of having somebody in the background answer the phone, right? So, and by the way, the other win was we got to see more customers, so there was kind of I call it a qualitative or type 2 win there. And the technician liked it because he didn't want to do the administrative stuff.
You don't want to stay on the phone for an hour waiting for an OEM to pick up the phone or look up the parts, and yeah, it's like they hate it. So it's the technician experience, and yeah, this area blew up really fast, and it's exciting when for your technicians, and this is kind of like the different. It's a tough job market. Attracting technicians, so it's like, how do you keep them? It's one thing to get them, and when you acquire businesses, and you've acquired 30 plus businesses, right? So, the acquisition is maybe the easier part. The retention is a whole another thing.
Yes, it totally is. And what they are looking for as you acquire is, okay, what do you bring that's incremental to make my job better? Because here you are saying how much greater of an organization you are, and you don't bring anything to the table. They don't buy into the value.
What's in it for me for this acquisition?
Right.
Why should I stick around? Because they're just scared
Right.
out of their mind.
Well, even not scared, they're skeptical. Right?
Skeptical. That's
yeah. Sometimes they're afraid, sometimes they're skeptical, and both are bad emotions. Because when you don't write them a narrative that shows them a path, they start to write it for themselves.
Right.
Conspiracy theories, and you guys are going to cut a bunch of people, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That thing just goes on in an infinite manner, because you haven't painted a path for them that shows them success, right? So, scaling your business, making sure the customer experience has the right level of support, adding that value back helps you grow revenue, but also shows your teams, how you can improve their business.
Absolutely, and Symeon, at the value stream level, right? Like delivering this value, this uptime, and how the technicians play a key role in that. In your experience, what have you seen, like some impediments to, like, kind of like freeing up the technician and just like letting them do their job?
Yeah, well, we've been talking about them, right? the understanding that you've got this critical piece, the customer facing piece, where the technician is performing the work that the customer is looking for, is needing, but there's all these other ancillary parts of the business that are necessary, all part of the total stream that goes from the opportunity to the cash side, all the things that have to happen for that to work well. And they're not standalone, discrete, independent pieces. So we can't just do customer service, answer the call, and okay, that's great. Well, we did that job and we'll push everything over. It's like, how does that integrate in for each call, for each customer, for each tech call, for each site visit? How do you make that flow all the way through to where you bill and then you receive the cash? And so then we can repeat, because if that cash doesn't come in, you don't repeat.
Absolutely. And talking about areas of opportunity in your value stream, and then there is billing and AR, and where you still see, especially a lot of the folks that we come across, there's just backlogs building up,
Yeah,
and
it's
backlogs not
fascinating.
exactly millions
Which,
and millions of dollars sitting in the backlog, and that's not waiting to be collected, that's waited to be
Yeah, waiting to
invoiced.
be billed. The work's
uh,
done, right? The customers receive the value, and so that ties back in with what we're talking about. It's like, okay, the technician finished the work and the appliance is working, the system is functional again. So why can't we bill? It's done. Well, because we don't have the right PO for the part that was ordered, or because I had one client where their notes were not written in English, and so there had to be some interpretation to be able to generate the invoice. And so these are all parts of that stream, of that
mm,
flow, that the technician has done the work, the really
mm,
important stuff, but then there are other pieces that are necessary. And so, that we've seen it where, okay, the service order is complete and we push it over to billing, but it's not ready to bill because there's
mm,
missing information, or because we don't know the cost of the part that was used yet, or we don't have a not to exceed. We reached a not to exceed and we need to get an exception to that. So those processes, and it's back to what Gyner was talking about, what you guys have developed in supporting the technician while they're on site. Don't do it 24, 48 hours after the job is done, and now we got to go back and collect more information so we can bill.
yes,
We need that information before they leave the job site. So how do we enable that?
yeah,
Things to focus on, and then to scale that, because it's got to happen in mass.
yes. And one of the things that I hope, Giner, I'm not giving out all of your secrets,
Oh,
but one of the unlocks working with Giner was being able to update the NTE while while the technician is on site, if there's a second work order, and how we staff that, and how that unlocked an increased transaction value. It's like, so maybe, Giner, you can talk about this unlock and how you were able to quickly achieve that.
yeah. So, a lot of our customers give us an NTE or a not to exceed. In service businesses, I should say our customers, but in service businesses, they give you a not to exceed. They say, hey, you know what, on this work order, I'm going to put a temporary roof. I'm a roofing guy, so I'll call it a roof of $800 on that work order. And what that does is the technician starts working, and all of a sudden this repair goes to $1,000. Well, in times past, we would write an estimate, leave the job site. Hopefully they approve the estimate. There's a whole litany of process issues after that happens. But assuming that does happen, that the better version of that for us became, how do we get somebody in the back office to work through the technology the customer has to get that NTE approved in real time, right? Whether that means calling somebody, going through their portals, whatever that is, and getting the work done, which the customer sees better value of. Also, it's our efficiency with our technician, because we don't have to dispatch them out potentially a second time. Or if we do, we're more planned, because now we've ordered the part that day, we come back the next day, we shorten the lead time, we can drive our efficiencies in the back office. So for me, that was like really important.
Yeah, and then on top of that, what was unlocked also, Gyner, is a somewhat of an upsell even, right? Like where the technician really wants to sell, but then there are all of these opportunities for PM here, or a fix there, that someone who's kind of interacting with the customer while the technician on site, you can do some cross sell or upsell there and increase again that transaction value. And get more utilization out of your technician. And there's a whole host of areas that we can talk about, billings and NTE and
Yeah.
whatnot. But then there's also collections, and okay, you've sent the invoice, but it's you're not collecting. You're not collecting on the money that you already owed. What are some of the areas of opportunities you've seen in overdue AR? And I know, Gyner, again, some of your plays has been, when you have tens of millions of dollars in AR, you can only call so many customers, and you were able to scale
Yeah.
AR and collection in a very smart way, and and almost eliminate or massively reduce the need to send off any bad debt, or accounts to third party collection. So maybe some of your secret sauce in that area and what you've done in those areas.
I don't know if it's the secret sauce. Like one, and we can get into this in the future. One, you always have to be thinking upstream. Just make sure that when you sell it to the customer, you're selling some sense of the rigidity of your invoice and process, so that the customer doesn't get you into a lot of complex asks of an invoice, like leave me a copy of the work order, mail a copy of the work order with the invoice, send it here, have this signature. Like the more steps you add, the more failure points you add. I always tell
For
people
reasons
that.
for reasons for dispute, right? It's like I'm disputing this invoice, and here's the yeah.
Keep it simpler, not simple. That's the wrong word. We have to make sure we drive revenue. Remember, we led with that here. So, but what I'd say is what I learned was sometimes customers are just disorganized by nature, right? And that's okay. Like, because you're doing the service here and the invoice goes here, right? And in your system, you still have the service address as the invoice address, even though the invoice should be going to a different bill to, as an example. Well, you never find that out until you add resources who call that customer and say, "Oh yeah, I don't know why it's not paid. Why are you sending me the bills? You should be sending them to point B, right?" And then you fix that, and all of a sudden you start getting paid, right? So, but you don't know that until you have the resources to be able to figure it out. And at scale, again, making the mistake of not managing your cash, there's a cash collections versus cost math equation that has to happen in your business, right?
Absolutely.
And the bigger your AR gets, the more cash you have outstanding, the less the whole I'm saving money by not adding resources equation starts to work.
Yeah. And there's been some tactical things we've done in this area that we'll dive into on maybe we'll have a dedicated episode around this. But also, Symeon, cash being the cash process being the end of the value stream. It's where really a lot of the opportunities, let's call them. I know Gyner doesn't like using the word defects, but it's where you find a lot of the opportunities all downstream.
Yeah, and the problem with them collecting their downstream is to be able to resolve them. Even as we've been talking about, you have to go upstream. So you have to go back to the original call. You have to go back to the information, the address that the invoice was sent to. Yeah. So and a lot of times, if the process isn't there to watch that on a frequent basis, and those aged receivables start to build and start to build, then you're talking about the volume that starts to become a problem, because it's hundreds, maybe thousands of transactions that have to be followed up on. And how do you do that and burn down through that backlog? So there's a project just to start with that. But if you don't have the processes, you need to have the people in place and the processes in place to prevent that backlog from growing again too. I think too many businesses where, oh, okay, we have a big AR, And so we work through the weekend and we resolve, get all the techs back into the office so that we can talk to them and find out what happened. And you resolve and burn down all the H receivables. And then guess what happens 3 months later? Oh, they have another pizza
It's,
party over the weekend and they're
Right.
working on it again, right?
That's right.
So, yeah, being able to follow that and
and it
understand
gets
why it's
too
building
big. It gets too
and
big
watching it
that you
before it
start
gets too big. Yeah.
you start piling up bad debt, and customers like, hey, you've had a year to collect on this. I'm not paying you. We've closed our cycle. We're
Yeah.
not paying you, and that's where it really hits hard.
Well, and it's all happening. Why is it happening? Because we're growing revenue. We're increasing the amount of billings. We're increasing the scale and the volume, and so very quickly it can snowball.
Yeah. And there's a lot to talk about, workforce planning and forecasting, and how to write resource, and the right people in the right place, and then there's accounts payable, which is another crucial area for keeping cash flow stable and relationships strong with your suppliers, because it can have also a big impact on your month end close, right? Especially in private equity, you got to submit those reports to the board and report on your financials. So AP is quite critical to ensure timely reporting for that decision making, and for compliance also reasons, and ensure a steady cash flow even after a long integration is complete. So any areas, Gyner and Symeon, in AP do you see for ongoing value creation?
How about just pay them on terms?
There's a concept.
What you start to find out is as you get deeper in with these businesses, they have relationships. And, a lot of these suppliers are very good at taking advantage. I don't mean that, maybe I do mean a little bit on a negative side, right? Just to be clear. Like, hey, pay us a net 15, even though you have net 30 terms, and we'll give you a 2% discount. Well, guess what? Cash means more to the business than that 2% in aggregate, right? So how about this? Pay them in 31 and, focus on the cash cycle of the business and realigning people's priorities to that. But for sure, AP, focusing on that, making sure you show opportunities where maybe we should be going to think about renegotiating cash payment terms with certain vendors, giving us optics to that. I think there's a ton of value there.
Yeah, and then not letting it stack up, just like we talked about with billing and with accounts receivable, is you don't want that sawtooth effect. It's a disastrous effect on cash flow, where we just let them build up, and then here's a project, and so we jump on all of our vendor invoices and work them down and get them cleared out, and then come back again a month later or 2 months later, and we're working on it again.
Exactly. And there's a whole host of issues around accuracy, and getting your invoices closed out, like you said, in a timely manner, and making sure that you don't have stuff on hold, because you're relying on these parts or this inventory to come in so you can complete the job. And if you don't have these POs ready and there's issues, you're having AP invoices go downstream, but there's no PO associated with it. Now you need to go back, and it creates a lot of delays and rework.
Well, and when does the vendor put you on credit hold for all the past due invoices? Right when you have that critical job where you need a part tomorrow, right? That's always the way it works out.
Totally right.
Yeah. So again, well, and there's a lot more, and being really specialists in the back office and support operation, and working with Gyner and working with you, Symeon, really, I'm going to talk about the stuff that I understand. There's a lot more value creation opportunities, in a business that we can cover in a series, but we'll focus on the areas, on these areas and more, and showing how you can turn post-integration activities into continual drivers of value. And each episode will bring you actionable insights to help you not just sustain but really grow the value that is created through M&A. So join us next time as we dig into the order to cash. So we'll start with order to cash and go a little bit deeper, because that's that's the primary driver. That's the revenue engine of the business, the order to cash. So we'll dive into starting with customer service and do a deep dive into customer service on our next episode, and look at how ongoing improvement in customer service can really keep the momentum going. So thank you for tuning in to this episode, and Gyner, Symeon, thank you for being here. And to our listeners, stay tuned for more on the M&A in the trades on continual value creation post integration. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yassin.